Hey now, All-Stars. I'm back, and I just quoted Smash Mouth, "This is bad." Hello, Internet. I'm holding things. Movies, Jesus. One day I will learn how to do an intro. Today I'm going to be talking about witchcraft in storytelling and writing, and particularly movies, because you all know that's where I get most of my information. I've been gone a while. If you've been on my Instagram, you can see that I've basically just been trying to just reconnect with anything that's not a city. I've just been really needing to kind of not be cooped up in my bedroom and talk about things. And so here I am, cooped up in my bedroom talking about things. And I have a plant now, which I haven't killed. So there's that. So for today's trope talk, we're gonna do something just slightly different, and we're just gonna talk about the tropes. What? Did anybody else hear that scream? We're just going to talk about how witchcraft is presented in stories and how you can use different types of witchcraft to your advantage, what they can do for you, and some drawbacks. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I really like it. I own a wand. It's got a thingy at the end. Can you see the thingy? And it's one of those like sensors. So if I were to take this to Harry Potter World in Florida, I could like do spells. I love it. I think magic has been kind of one of my favorite. Oh my god, someone's still screaming. If you can hear this, it's clearly like a joyous scream and not like a scared scream, but it's still screaming and it's scaring me. I'm scared. So I just really like it. Magic, I think, was kind of one of those things that really drew me to storytelling when I was a kid. I grew up with Disney movies. I was clearly one of the Harry Potter generation. Fantasy was my favorite. I was a big Narnia fan, Percy Jackson, you name it, I was into it. Except for The Golden Compass. I don't know why. Nothing against it, I just never read it. Maybe I should. They're coming out with that new series. What I did was I actually watched 22 movies this time, which was a slightly more reasonable, I'm just holding this now, which was a slightly more reasonable number, and I ended up kind of looking at whether or not witchcraft was looked at as a good thing or a bad thing, or a kind of neutral, there are some good witches, some bad witches sort of thing. And then I split the movies into 3 different types of witchcraft, which is why I'm holding things, because they're symbolic representations of the 3 different types of witchcraft. I thought I was clever. This is gonna be like a laser pointer today, just saying. These are the films that I watched for this video. Dancing's fun. So the first type of witchcraft, and I just named them myself, this isn't official names, this is just what I'm calling them. So the first type of witchcraft is what I'm calling puritanical witchcraft. I do not have anything for that. I feel like this is something I would definitely have, since it's an actual major portion of my PhD project, was a major portion of my master's project, and has been something I've been obsessed with since I was like 11 years old. The Crucible is one of my favorite plays. Why don't I have anything? So the closest thing I have is this tiny book of Shakespearean insults. I actually do have a like big book of Shakespeare, but it was too big. I'm gonna hold this anytime I talk about puritanical witchcraft. Puritanical witchcraft is basically what you think of when you think of like witch trials, Burn the Witch, Salem, kind of old timey. That's puritanical witchcraft. These witches are the ones that will have made a pact with Satan, or are demons, or worship Satan, or blah blah blah. Satan. The second type of witchcraft is my wand, and I call it fantastical witchcraft. This is the sort of witchcraft that has no real reason to exist. Witches just sort of are, and they have a wand or they have a finger and they can point and magic happens. That is fantastical witchcraft. And finally is my little flower crown. This was made for me a few years ago by my cousin, but we're coming up on the holiday of Beltane or May Day, which is a real Wiccan or witch holiday. Flowers and flower crowns and these colors are often associated with Beltane, which is why this is for my third category. I didn't name it. It's religious witchcraft. I'm calling it religious witchcraft. I kind of categorized religious witchcraft as something you had to study. Sometimes that could be satanic or puritanical witchcraft as well, because you can basically do whatever as long as you vow to serve Satan. In this case, you just you can become a witch as long as you study it. And usually there's some sort of ritual or worship to it. It seems to be generally based around Wicca. Those are the 3 types of witchcraft. I'm gonna talk about it, and this is the wrong way. Oh yeah. I'm just a nerd today. So I'm gonna talk real quick about the moral alignment of the 3 different types of witchcraft. I tried to separate these movies, these witch movies that I watched, into 3 categories: good witches, neutral witches, and evil witches. There were 0 good witches. None. And the reason for this, I have decided with my vast knowledge of studying 22 films, is that when witchcraft is portrayed as good, there's usually some sort of acknowledgement that people will use it for evil. Voldemort. But when witches are evil, there doesn't have to be that acknowledgement, particularly because of that association with Satan. And some of these things like to go full Satan on us. Full Satan. Of these 22 films, 13 of them were neutral witches, and the other 9 films were purely evil witches. There's a little bit of leeway on that, but generally. But interestingly enough, there were no stated neutral puritanical witches. Anytime Satan was involved, it was evil magic. And on the opposite end, there were no evil religious witches. Any single time religion wasn't involved, it was explicitly stated that, you know, most religious witches are good, but these particular ones, if they were evil, were using it for evil. So there was also some leeway in this one as well. I'm going to talk about kind of why people might want to use these films, how we can do it really well, and how we might not be doing it particularly well. Puritanical witchcraft. I'm bringing up my Shakespeare book, I'm going to use this as a pointer. Puritanical witchcraft is often used when they want witchcraft to be a particularly demonic, evil force. This is primarily used in horror movies. Also, it allows you to call back to the witch trials. A lot of fantastical witchcraft can be related back to the witch trials, but almost all of those explicitly state that no real witches were actually burned during the witch trials. But if you want witchcraft to be evil, the easiest way to do that is throw Satan at it. Sometimes this works really, really well. 2016's film, The Witch, or The Vivitch, if you're going to be like me and pedantic and just really like the way the title is written out, this can be done amazingly. Seriously, if you haven't seen this movie, I cannot recommend it enough. However, a TV film made in Britain called The Coven does this not very well, in the sense that it explicitly implies that Wiccans were Satanists, or are Satanists, or were involved with Satanism. That's just not true. You can't combine puritanical witchcraft with religious witchcraft unless you are saying that these satanic witches are disguising themselves as religious witches. That's the only way you can have your cake and eat it too. This movie does not do that. I understand it is a TV movie. If you want a humorous take, Hocus Pocus is really good. There are different ways that you can do puritanical witchcraft without it being a horror movie. Now, I'm gonna warn you not to fall back on Satan just cause. There are some really interesting evil sects of the fantastical witches, in particular both versions of Suspiria, but it's very distinctly spooky and terrifying, and in the case of the more recent film, disgusting. But you can have a more fantastical thing and kind of associate it with demons without throwing Satan at it. There are really kind of interesting things you can do with that. So if you want witches to be evil, Satan is a really good way to go about it. A really, really interesting way that this was done recently was the adaptation of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. It does this really, really well. Weirdly, I'm still confused by that. But there are also very interesting ways that you can go about evil witchcraft without having the name Lucifer unscramble itself on a whiteboard, which actually happens in The Coven. Make it interesting. I pulled up one insult from Macbeth so that I can prove this. I'm just not holding up a book about Shakespeare without mentioning the reason why, which is the 3 witches in Macbeth, 3 of my favorite characters. I love every single interpretation of them. So here is one insult from Macbeth, and this is a classic. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Ta-da! There's a lot from Hamlet. So much from Hamlet. Shout out to Jenny who got this for me at the Globe Theatre. I'm bringing my wand back. It's a mustache. Now I'm going to talk about fantastical witchcraft. Fantastical witchcraft is the easiest to do. You don't have to explain where witchcraft comes from. A prime example of this is Teen Witch, where witches just sort of are, or the original TV show or movie that's Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or the one that came before that, Bewitched, both of which are great. In Sabrina the Teenage Witch, all she needs to do is point her finger and things happen. Like, it's a whole thing where her finger's like, it's a plot point. Most of the time witchcraft is inherited, it's just something that people are. A lot of fantasy stories, books, TV shows, movies, blah blah blah, use fantastical witchcraft. Beautiful Creatures uses it, which is on my list. Harry Potter uses it. Vampire Diaries uses it. There are so many different things that you can do with fantastical magic. Fantastical magic is the most versatile. Any single time that there is fantastical magic, it will likely be neutral. There are only 2 instances of fantastical magic being used for specifically evil, and it is, like I said before, both versions of Suspiria. Every single other type of fantastical magic is neutral. It's basically stated that our main characters are good, beautiful people, but there are ways where this magic can be used for evil. Why is this? Well, fantastical magic is really common in kids programming or programming for teenagers, things where something like Satan might be a little bit much, which is why The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina was surprising, because I thought it was going to kind of be a little bit more like maybe a darker version of the original TV show, and then Satan happened and I was like, whoa. It's usually kind of a more subdued, kind of calm version of magic. If you're writing a book for younger readers or writing a story or a film for younger audiences, fantastical magic is a really good bet for this. It's also a really easy way to do things. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to give someone a reason for worshiping Satan that might not be particularly evil, like the way that Sabrina tries to do it. It's just a way for people to just have it, and that's it. There's no real way to gain it other than being born with it or unlocking something within yourself. I don't want to say it's the easy way out, but it is the easy way out. It becomes extremely versatile because you can tell any story. Any character could have this magic. Like with Harry Potter, which I didn't watch for this because I knew I'd go down a black hole. But obviously, if you want the best interpretation of fantastical magic in film or in books, this is it. There's nothing, you're not really gonna get better than this. This is a world that kind of uses magic, and the fact that it is fantastical and it doesn't really have an explanation other than the fact that you were born with it, it's able to take that and do something interesting with it, which some other movies or characters, like something like the 2006 film called The Woods, which doesn't really explain what the difference between the witches and the characters who are special and who are kidnapped or whatever, doesn't really explain why that really is. Or you could have a story that very much like, for example, Teen Witch or Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It's more about the magic and using the magic. That can be fun, and like I said, is really, really good for younger audiences, but what's something that Harry Potter does really, really well is magic is more of a means to a greater story. Want another not so great version? Fantastic Beasts series. Cursed Child. Your dangers with looking into fantastical witchcraft is obviously going to be it's too vague, there's nothing really to explain there. You're really going to have to kind of flesh out the world, what magic is used for, why magic exists, who is using it, and what their purposes are for. Why are they hiding? Why aren't they hiding? There's a lot to consider when using fantastical magic, but fantastical magic is a really versatile and easy way to just sort of put magic into your world, and then that way you don't have to spend too much of your story thinking about how to do that. Does that make sense? I feel like it makes sense. This is going behind here. Finally, I never took this off because I don't have a mirror near me. We're gonna talk about religious witchcraft. Religious witchcraft, I think, is one of my favorites because it's really, really interesting. You get into the ritual of things, and anybody can be a witch. There's nothing about you have to be born with it, you have to make a pact. All you need to do is start studying it and it starts to work. I think this is a really, really interesting idea. This is a really, really interesting kind of thing, and it's something that's real. Now, your opinions of whether or not magic or witchcraft exists in our world is moot, because there are witches. That's just, you can't get around that. Whether or not you think that their magic actually works, it doesn't matter. Fact is, they exist. And that's what makes it especially interesting, but it is also what makes it especially dangerous. If you want to use religious witchcraft, you either have to go my direction and just make up a new religion, or you have to do some insane research into modern paganism, Wicca, whatever sort of magic religion that you want to base your witchcraft religion on. Go for it, but you have to do some extreme research because this isn't just like a made up thing. There are real people who do believe this and who for them this is a religion, and that's a very important thing to consider. Obviously that means that there are ways to do this well and ways to do this poorly. One of the most interesting things about religious witchcraft in these stories is you can really kind of explore how this might integrate into the real world. The best example of this, and honestly one of my favorite films of all time, I cannot stress how good this film is The Love Witch. And The Love Witch kind of presents a very, very Wiccan view of witchcraft. They never actually use the term Wicca. They only ever use the term witches. However, a lot of the rituals shown, ritual chants you hear and, you know, songs you hear and things that you see happening is true to Wicca in some way, shape, or form. There are obviously inconsistencies, things cut out. So it clearly has a very particular basis, and the type of magic done in the film is explicitly stated to be done with like hallucinogenic potions, and there are more ritual things. So whether or not her magic is real is less the point than what the story is trying to say, which means that it's a very kind of grounded, more realistic look into how other people would respond to people who call themselves witches, or how witches might do spells in the real world, where pointing your finger isn't gonna really do anything. On the other hand, you have a movie like Virgin Witch, which don't watch if you're not into exploitation films. It's like basically porn. It's not, but a lot of like tracking shots, like just really slowly moving up people's boobs. Not a fan, it's not a good movie. It's not a good movie. However, they do try and use kind of this religious witchcraft thing, and you do kind of see them performing a Wiccan ritual. But it never really decides if the magic is real or if it's just the religious ceremony, so it veers into fantastical witchcraft territory at times because she's more of a natural witch and seems to have manipulative telekinetic powers over people. So it doesn't really commit. And when you don't commit, that's when it becomes extremely wishy-washy. Like I said, this is one of my favorites because I'm just a big fan of world building and ritual and kind of seeing how things might have actually kind of worked out in the real world. But I'm also a fan of making up my own religion. Even for witchcraft religions, real witchcraft religions, Wicca isn't the only one out there. There are different ways to practice Wicca within the religion. There are different paths that people go on. You can do it on your own. There's something called eclectic Wicca, where you can basically take from whatever you want and make it your own. There's very, very strict rules in some aspects and very, very lax rules in other aspects. So you get some really, really disparate kind of ideas, and you have to be really, really careful what you say is true, because it might not be true either for everyone or even enough people. I don't think that I can accurately pull that off. I just kind of make up my own world where I can do it myself. And I love world building. But if you're not a fan of world building and you don't mind doing extra research, talk to real witches, talk to real Wiccans, talk to real neo-pagans, talk to people who do this all the time, whose life revolves around this, because these are real people. The danger of this as well is implying by joining these religions you will have cosmic powers. That's not what, at least it's not what Wicca is about. I apologize to other neo-pagan religions. Wicca is the only one that I've done any real study on, based very, very extremely on Jungian psychology and about finding your innermost self rather than directly influencing the world around you. There are spells that you can try, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. For Christianity or other Abrahamic religions, it's like a prayer. If you do believe in God, then praying to him is really just asking him for a favor. And then he must then decide whether or not to grant you that prayer or not. Spells are very much similar. So you run into kind of the merging of fantastical and religious witchcraft. The other biggest mistake is conflating puritanical witchcraft with religious witchcraft. It is not the same thing. There were no, as far as we are aware, real witchcraft practitioners who were actually persecuted during the witch trials. They were innocent women. And to imply that people who study Wicca or who believe in witchcraft religions are inherently Satanist is like saying that atheists are Satanists. That doesn't make sense. Atheism doesn't believe in God, therefore they can't believe in the devil. Similarly, Wiccans do not believe in heaven and hell, therefore they don't believe in the concept of God and Satan. Their beliefs, their gods are different. Now, there are some neo-pagans who do identify as Satanists, and Satanism is a real religion, but the vast majority of them, and I'm not saying all, there are some people, vast majority of them see Satan as a kind of different sort of figure, more of a representation of something else rather than actually worshiping evil. Now, there are some who do, but a lot of times they don't, and they're very, very vocal about those misconceptions. You really have to be careful about conflating things that just aren't true, because you might offend people. It's important to a lot of people. You represent their world correctly. So if you're going down that path, make sure you either do the research or come up with something on your own. That's my advice for that. Wow, every single time I start this, it gets like really dark really fast. Once again, those are my basically just discussions of the different types of witchcraft, how you can use them, and how the moral alignment can be associated with all of them. Go out there, write your witchcraft stories, have fun, but think about sort of the different types of witchcraft that you want to use, the moral alignment you want those to be associated with, and the work that you are going to have to put in to make it work. Either you're going to have to find a really, really interesting way of making Satan more interesting than evil. You're going to have to find a story to revolve around witchcraft to make it more interesting than pointing and something happening, or you're going to have to put in the research to make a very accurate representation of real life religion, or world build your own to avoid butting heads with people who actually believe this in real life. So that's my lecture. Write your witch stories, please. I love them. I love them. Thank you for watching. I'm really sorry I've been gone for so long. Sometimes you just need to step back from things to enjoy nature, which is a really good thing to be doing around the start of spring, and the weather's been really great. I'm just rambling at this point. Enjoy my wand. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked it. If you do celebrate one of the witchcraft religions, I hope you have a wonderful Beltane, May Day, May Eve, whatever you want to call it. For people who are not, enjoy your NSYNC memes. See you soon. Bye. One of the other reasons why I've been gone so long is that I've just been in like pure entertainment anxiety mode. What were they thinking putting Endgame and the Battle of Winterfell in the same weekend? What were you thinking? I just spent the entire week just like leading up to these, just like, did you hear my knee?